Hey everyone, welcome to Mushroom Wonderland. I'm going to go out into the woods with my dog Gunner here in October of 2024 to discover what kind of wild mushrooms are growing out here. It is autumn, the leaves are falling, and the mushrooms are popping up. So if you've ever been curious about the mushrooms growing on the sides of the trail, maybe in your favorite forest, this is a channel for you. I'm the Vice President of the Kitsap Peninsula Mycological Society. I'm a mycology educator at Olympic College in Bremerton. And today I just want to take you out into the woods, help to describe some of these mushrooms and their uses, whether they're potentially edible or maybe dangerous. So come with me and my dog Gunner into the woods in October of 24 to discover what kind of wild mushrooms are growing out here in Mushroom Wonderland. Come on, Gunner.
Mushroom Wonderland.
Whoa, check these out. How cool. Super furry and purple. Wow, so what a cool mushroom this is. This really purple, fuzzy mushroom growing here in the forest. And it's got dark gills under there, and it has this kind of reddish spores that will sometimes accumulate. You can see that orange color right there. That's the spores accumulating. This one is in the genus Cortinarius, so a super photogenic mushroom. The Cortinarius Viaus, or the violet web cap. It is edible, but it was not that great. I mean, I ate it last year and it was okay, but it's one of the few Cortinarius that they really consider to be okay for eating. And they're fruiting like crazy this year. So some years I rarely see them. This year there's a lot. There's probably 30 of them fruiting in this area right now. And these are mycorrhizal, growing with the trees out here. So big Douglas fir make for good host for these. And a lot of them are very young, only came up a few days ago. So, you know, a big one like this, it's already putting spores out. You can definitely see the spore deposit right there on the stipe and on the edge of the cap. And these will often have a webby-like cortina. See that? It's like a webbing that connects the cap. This is known as a cortinal veil and is the reason for the genus name, Cortinarius, is because of that cortina. So these are really, really cool. Not gonna collect any for the basket. I'm gonna leave these younger ones here, definitely to grow up. Really, it's just best for taking photos of. And if you're in a pinch, you could eat these, but I'm gonna leave them behind today. And yeah, what a cool mushroom though. Cortinarius violaceus. Wow, check this out. Probably the most iconic mushroom in the world. This one, your red one with the white spots. This is a classic mushroom, you know. It shows up on t-shirts and handbags and socks, and your emoji on your phone for a mushroom is this mushroom. It's the Mario mushroom. It's the mushroom some people say that the Santa Claus Christmas story was modeled after. I have a whole video about that. But this one we call Amonita Muscaria. And this one is, you know, you ask any kid in the world to draw you a picture of a mushroom, this is definitely what they're gonna draw. And it's red, bright red, and it has these white spots. So when this mushroom was young, it was an egg, and it burst out of that egg, and the egg shells are left on top of its cap, making those white studs all over it, or warts. Sometimes literature describes them as warts. But this one is toxic in all the field guides you'll ever read, but it can be detoxified through a cooking process, which is really kind of unnecessary, and it's a novelty. But some people will just swear up and down they're super delicious. But it also contains some psychoactive properties that are like a deliriant. So this one's been famous, famously called a magic mushroom, although it's definitely not a magic mushroom in the sense of the kind that you get at the Grateful Dead concert are a true hallucinogen. This one is a deliriant, a dissociative. It's unpleasant from what I hear. I've personally never experienced it, but there's a reason why they're not illegal, and probably because it's so unpleasant. Long history, a lot of folklore surrounding these toadstools, the Amonita Muscaria, the fly agaric, really iconic mushroom all around the world, grows in the temperate forest, mycorrhizal with these evergreen trees here. It hooks up with all kinds of trees, aspen, leafy oaks, and conifer trees. So there's your Amonita Muscaria. We'll call this one toxic. The fly agaric, they used to put it in their windows, and apparently flies would drink the nectar off of it and start tripping and then fall down and probably die from the muscarine. And it's got iobotenic acid and muscimol. These are chemicals that are toxic, but also create these deliriant effects. So anyways, Amonita Muscaria, always cool to see that one showing up in fall here in October. Beautiful, beautiful trailside mushroom. I'm just going to leave this one behind though, and really, really cool addition to the forest, the Amonita Muscaria. This is a forest on the Kitsap Peninsula of Washington State, right down near sea level. And we have these beautiful conifer forests that are just draped in moss and ferns like this. I like to walk on game trails oftentimes. I find old trails made by deer and just follow those. And, often mushrooms are kind of growing alongside trails. It's like they kind of like the opportunity to catch a ride on somebody's pant leg or an animal's leg or something. Look what we got here. These guys are armillaria or honey mushrooms coming out of the ground right here. These can be parasitic, growing on the roots of live trees. These are really young, and I can see all that ornamentation, and then they get these kind of whiskers in the center of the cap. And your honey mushroom, I think they're good to eat. Some people experience GI distress. One of the largest organisms in the world is actually a huge honey mushroom mycelium in Oregon, about 2,400 square acres, and it's thought to be maybe 8,000 years old, just living underground. And all we see is the fruiting body here. And but it has been outruled as the largest organism by a seagrass in Australia. So there's a seagrass that's larger than that armillaria. Here's a big Russula species, kind of green in the disc and sort of pale, kind of pinkish pale on the outside of the cap there. But a lot of different species of Russula, the brittle gills. I'm not going to even try to ID that one. There's another one right there, same color. So a unique species. If I was a little more enthusiastic, I would study those, but honestly, they're just kind of boring to me. And Russula can be really boring like that. Whoa, look right here. Boom, that. There's a chunky situation going on. Some golden chanterelles. Dude, and those are super thick. Look at that. So these are really prized edibles, make it into a lot of my videos. And they grow in association with these big Douglas fir and western hemlock trees out here in the west. Always mycorrhizal, about 60 species of Cantharellus. So this one is Cantharellus formosus, or the golden Pacific chanterelle. Cantharellus formosus meaning beautiful drinking cup. So this one's not as vase-shaped as some of them can get. This one actually has a little bit of what's called rose comb mutation on the top of the cap. That's where gills and lameliae are trying to grow on top of the cap surface. All kinds of different theories as to what causes this. Some people think that it got froze and then they started to regrow again on top of the cap, but it is not froze out here. Some, paper suggests that maybe it's petroleum products that have been spilled into the soil. When they were logging this area 100 years ago, you could see a lot of stumps where they did log. I don't know, that's plausible, I suppose, but either way, I wouldn't be afraid to eat them. Me personally, I don't eat chanterelles. They cause me stomach irritation. But, you know, I'm going to cut the base off of these, clean them up a little, and they're going in the basket for sure. And my wife likes them, and my family and everybody, but I just personally, I can't eat very much. But these are big, chunky golden chanterelles. They've been fruiting for a couple months. No end in sight, man. What an epic mushroom season 2024 is. And here we are in October, just still finding chanterelles that were fruiting back in the summertime. So really cool. This is a pretty common mushroom growing here next to this log. It's actually growing like off of the decaying wood, and often you'll find these just growing right off of the logs. And this one is commonly called the deer mushroom, or Pluteus cervinus. And this is a really common one, the Pluteus or Pluteus. They love to grow on rotting wood, usually hardwoods, and they have a pink spore print. And it could look a little bit like an Amanita. It's got whitish gills when it's young, but they'll turn kind of pink colored. And the gills are not attached, so it's kind of a ball and socket thing. You can go like this and really just break that stem clean off of the gills and the cap. And it's an edible mushroom, but like my friend says, it's edible but forgettable. And even when it's cooked, it kind of has the taste of raw potatoes. Super duper common. And I think they call it the deer or the deer shield because of that color. It's kind of deer colored, like a deer hide. I don't know. Not a very tasty one, but it is edible. So you can get your Pluteus growing on hardwood logs like this. I'm going to just kind of leave this one here and keep on moving. And these ones in the genus Suillus, so they have this spongy pore surface underneath. This one known as Suillus americanus, or the chicken fat mushroom. And that sounds better than these taste from what I've heard. I haven't eaten them, but they grow in these large troops. Suillus, generally a genus of mushrooms that just kind of turn to mush when you cook them. They don't really get golden brown very well, but I think a lot of people dehydrate them for that reason. And they're used in soups and stews, especially in like Eastern Europe. But these really common, coming out a lot this year. And the name chicken fat sounds kind of delicious to me. They have all of these dark scales on top of the cap, punctate stipe, so they have all these little spots all over the stipe like that, and that ragged margin right there, all these scales kind of hanging off, growing in big troops, associated with pine. Suillus americanus or americanus. These ones are edible but forgettable. So in a pinch, yeah, you could collect a lot of these. I just wash them really good and cook them for a long time. Maybe put them in a soup or something, and they could add a real mushroomy flavor. But as far as texture goes, I don't think they're a very good mushroom for eating. But they will go on the edible list. The Suillus americanus. Here's some trailside mushrooms that are actually a pretty decent edible, and I'm going to pick these two. These ones were already picked, but these ones are known as Lactarius rubrolacteus. So our Pacific Northwest Lactarius deliciosus, or the edible milk cap, the saffron milk cap, some people call them. They have these orange concentric rings. These ones are growing in association with pine trees. And you can see that orange colored stipe. And these are in a genus called Lactarius. One thing about the Lactarius genus of mushrooms is when you cut the stipe, they will often exude a lactation or a milky-like substance. These ones are not very milky, but when I cut the top of the cap like that, you can see it starts to turn really deep orange. And it also has green spots, little green bruising. It kind of oxidizes and gets these little green spots. And those are great keys for this mushroom, which is a really valued culinary mushroom in France. They really, really like these in other parts of the world. They tend to go overlooked a bit here, but I ate some recently, and I thought they were really delicious. So the Saffron Milk Cap, or our Pacific Northwest variety, Lactarius rubrolacteus, is a pretty delicious edible if you can beat the bugs to it. They like to grow in association with these trees. So right here we have a 5-needle white pine tree that they're growing under, and they grow pretty plentifully. So yeah, don't be shy to pick these. There's a lot of them out in the forest, and they're a good edible. This mushroom right here is an example of another Lactarius, but this one, Lactarius pallescens, when it gets damaged, it actually turns this purple color, which is really cool. But unlike the rubrolacteus, this one has a very strong lactating effect. When I cut these gills, you can immediately see that lactation, or that milky white substance, come out of that. So that is how this genus got its name, Lactarius, because it lactates like that. The edibility of this one is unknown, but it sure is cool how it bruises purple like that. And here's a nice grouping of them, and man, this one really produces a lot of milk, so it doesn't take much damage to really get a lot of lactation coming out of this. And a beautiful mushroom. I'm going to taste this guttation. The lactation on this tastes pretty sweet, tastes just like milk, really. Really pretty cool. So convex cap, pale white, and these bruise purple, which is pretty indicative. I mean, there's not a lot of other mushrooms out here that do that. So this is a species complex, and the one here in the Pacific Northwest might be undescribed, but it's got these purplish tones where it's damaged, and they're fruiting like crazy out here right now and have a lot of delicious lactation coming out of them. But I don't know, I'm not really one to be trying out strange mushrooms for the first time, so until someone comes along and really tries these out, we're just going to call them unknown for now, the Lactarius pallescens. This is a large white pine tree, a 5-needle pine. And at the base of it, I came across these beautiful bright red mushrooms that really stand out against the landscape. And these are in the genus Russula, the brittle gills. And there's a lot of those here, a couple hundred species here in Washington state alone. And they are called brittle gills because they just break so easy. They're very fragile. And these ones have a pink stipe. You see that? A lot of the Russulas will kind of blush, but these ones especially have a pink stipe basically all the time. So there's the Russula emetica group, which is supposedly emetic and make you vomit. These ones look similar, but that pink stipe is the difference. And this one is called Russula rhodocephalia, and supposedly it's edible but not very tasty. So and it looks so much like the Russula emetica because of that bright red color. People tend to avoid them, which just might not be a bad idea, because sometimes the blushing on the emetica group will look, you know, almost consistently pink like these do, or red. But a beautiful mushroom, really photogenic. One of the many Russulas that I can kind of identify down to species just by looking at it. The Russula rhodocephalia has the red stipe, the red base, white gills, cream-colored spore print. And these ones are a little bit peppery if you're to nibble and spit it. But it's edible, but you know, probably not really worth it, so leave those behind. But really cool, Russula rhodocephalia. These are nice looking mushrooms. So they've got this kind of scaly look on the cap. You see that cap has got a pretty unique look. There's a lot of different shapes and sizes of mushrooms, and some of them are quite distinct. And these ones with this scaly cap are familiar to me. I'm going to flip this one over, and as we look underneath, we see it's got a pore surface, so it's kind of like a sponge under here. that has these elongated pores, or these holes. And that's where the spores fall out of. This one has a little bit of a skirt or an annulus here on the stipe. And there's 4 of them growing right here that are obvious, growing in the moss underneath Douglas fir trees. So these are associated with the trees, and these are in a genus of mushrooms called Suillus. And so these ones with that tomentose cap are Suis Lakei, a really common mushroom, the scaly Suillus. And so these are edible but forgettable. They're pretty non-desired and pretty common. Suillus is a fairly large genus of mushrooms that, you know, they're bolete-like. They have these sponge surfaces, but with those big yellow pores, different from Boletus edulis or your porcini mushroom. But these ones are edible. You could eat them. Not highly desired, and they're pretty dang common. Suis Lakei. Really bright mushroom, kind of standing out here on the side of the trail. Let me pick this from the base, and look at that. Look at those crazy gills. So kind of a gray colored gill. You can tell these have like a dark spore print, and you know, pretty decurrent, pretty vase shaped, and this one pretty rosy color. That's why it gets the name Gomphidius subrosaeus, or the rosy Gomphidius. The hideous Gomphidius is the yellow stipe base like that. And oh, here's another one. Nice. So Gomphidius is interesting because it's a gilled bolete. It's actually not a true gilled mushroom. This is a bolete in the boletales. And so when it was described, they thought that it associated with certain pine trees, and then it was suggested that it's actually probably parasitizing the mycelium of Suillus. And these are edible. They have a really slimy cuticle on top of the cap here. Really slimy when they get wet. Right now it's kind of dry out, so it's sticky. Hear it? But you know, some people try to wash off or peel off that sticky layer and then eat them. I just think that they look pretty ugly and kind of gross. So personally, I don't eat them. I've never tried them, but you know, I don't know. I would if somebody cooked them up, but I'm not going to go out of my way. So there you go. Gomphidius subrosaeus. Look at all these mushrooms growing right here off of this old log. This is a red alder log, and it's got these really pretty tall funnel-shaped mushrooms. These ones are very distinct, really beautiful mushrooms, and they're growing all over these logs right here. These ones are in the Hydropus family, known as Gerronema, and these ones not edible, just not a lot of information about them. There's a lot of mushrooms that are like that just have very little in the literature about them, about edibility or anything like that. They're somewhat rare. I looked these up on iNaturalist, and there just isn't many observations. This is the first observation of them in Kitsap County on iNaturalist anyways, but they're not uncommon as far as this forest is concerned. They are growing all over these logs. I don't know if they're edible. They're in a family of mushrooms that are, you know, white rot decayers, and they're growing off of wood and doing a good job breaking down these alder trees. So it's interesting, all the different mushrooms that will be working on these different logs to break down the, you know, cellulose or the lignin in the forest. And some of them are really well known to humans as to whether they're edible or not, and some of them we just don't know much about, but they sure are pretty growing here in the woods. And I'm gonna leave these ones behind today. Kind of a cool genus that just needs to be studied a little bit more. Man, I keep seeing these huge purplish colored mushrooms growing right alongside the trail. So you've probably seen these too if you've been out in the forest this autumn. And it's this large purplish mushroom with this white stem and white gills. This one looks like it's getting kind of old. It's all brown in the gills there. So this mushroom is in a family of mushrooms called the brittle gills because they're very brittle. They really just kind of flake apart real easy. And you can snap the stem like chalk. You see that? Most mushrooms will bend and kind of string apart. But these ones, the Russulas, they snap real easy, and the gills are super duper brittle. You can just flake them away real easy like that. And if you can determine that it's a Russula by finding its brittleness, you know, it's really the cellular structure that makes these mushrooms a little bit different. But once I determine that I have a Russula because it's so brittle, I can try a little nibble on the edge of the cap to see if it's spicy or not. And just chew it on the tip of your tongue for like 10 seconds and spit that out. And these ones are fruiting a lot around here, and I'm not afraid to do that. You could do that with any mushroom, but Russula, really a safe genus of mushrooms. And if it's spicy or acrid, as we call it, that's one of the ones to avoid. It could cause some GI upset, perhaps vomiting. This one is sweet. It's mild. There's no spiciness to it at all. This one, known as our Pacific Northwest shrimp Russula or Russula olympiana. So a beautiful mushroom, and when you get them young enough, they can be a really good edible. And if you nibble and spit these, I suggest you try it out. And some of these mild ones actually taste really good raw, like you almost want to swallow it. But the Russula olympiana, you know, the bugs really like these, so you got to find them young, but these can be a delicious mushroom. Growing all over the sides of the trail. But there's about 100 different species of Russula just here in the Pacific Northwest. So you definitely want to determine whether it's mild or spicy. And figuring it out to a species level can sometimes be a bit of a trick. It's a good one to gather. This one's a little bit old. I'm going to leave it behind. But you could definitely pick those for the basket. Ooh, this is a pretty cool mushroom growing right here on the side of the trail. This one is known as the sweetbread mushroom or the miller. So Clitopilus prunulus. This one has pink spores. If you were to get a spore deposit on a white piece of paper, you would see pink spores. And a dangerous look-alike known as Clitosabi rivulosa, that one has white spores. So make sure you have pink spores if you're collecting these ones for the basket. And they have a farinaceous smell. The odor of cucumbers or watermelon rinds, or some people think wet flour, and I can smell it all. Doesn't take much imagination with a fresh specimen, but when they start to get dried out, they lose that. But they're a little bit delicate. They don't last very long in the basket, but there's quite a nice flush of them here, so I'm gonna collect these and get them in the basket. They like to grow on the sides of trails, and they rarely get much bigger than this, but I think I see a really big one across the trail, so we'll have a look at that. They have this kind of cloudy look with like gray splotches on the cap, and definitely have that farinaceous smell of cucumbers or wet flour, and they're a handsome little mushroom and said to be a really choice edible. So I'm going to collect these for my basket. I'm going to pinch the dirt off of the bottom of the stipe there, and these ones are kind of delicate, so you know, carry them with care. They're fragile, but I'm excited to see what these ones taste like. This would be the biggest one I have ever seen, if that's what we got here. Sweetbread. Look at that. That is huge. So, never seen one that big. Clitopilus prunulus. Huge sweetbread mushroom. Very cool. And a younger one, but still large. Wow. This bizarre mushroom, commonly called the hawk's wing. You could probably see why. It looks a bit like feathers, right? What a bizarre little mushroom. And this is growing, gosh, just fused to this brush right here, the salal. Let me get it from the base. There we go. And as we look underneath, it's got teeth, like a hedgehog mushroom. It's got gray little teeth-like structures under here. So not gills, not pores, but teeth. But also known as the bitter hedgehog. So it is edible, but kind of bitter. But I've heard that they cook down nice into a stew or something where the flavor can get masked just a little bit, and it still lends that umami, savory kind of flavor. I see another young hawk's wing growing right here. Look at that. How cute are they? These are young ones, but they can get really big and huge and kind of gnarly, and a very ornamented, very scaly mushroom. That's what we call scales, or these fibers that are curling up on the ends. Beautiful sarcodon. And this one, you know, you could definitely collect it for the basket. I think it's a Dyers mushroom too, but personally I don't really have a use for them, so I just leave them behind. They are sure cool to look at though. This is a huge patch of Hydnellum peckii, the bleeding tooth fungus. That one's still got a little of that guttation, that little bloody guttation coming off of it. You see that? Strawberries and cream, but this is what they look like when they get older. That was a big fruiting. There's more right here. So, you know, even though they're like kind of rare for a lot of people, more here. That one's weird. They're pretty common in this area, and they just have some really strange morphology. So, Hydnellum peckii, pretty common, and they're already in their late season. You know, they typically seem to come out a little later when it's more rainy, but oh, look at that. There's some beauties. Oh, they're everywhere. There's a couple in the middle of the trail. Here's a bunch more right over here. Hydnellum peckii. You know, a lot of people want to get these photos. There it is. The bloody guttation on the Hydnellum. So, yeah, if I touch it, it'll leave a yellow dye on my finger. And these have really strong pigment and are non-toxic, but really, really neat. Gotta get some pictures of these guys. This is a really cool mushroom right here, known as the Phaeolus schweinitzii, or the Dyers Polypore. And it's a popular mushroom for people who like to fungal pigment dye. So they take the pigments out of this mushroom and transfer them onto protein fabric like wool or silk. And this is a strange mushroom growing here at the base of this big stump, and it's always growing at the base of a tree, and they love to eat the cellulose inside the tree. And this guy is saprotrophic, meaning that it eats decaying matter, but it also can be an indicator of butt rot. So it can be parasitic. And if you have one of these growing at the base of the nice tree in your lawn, you know, that tree might be on its way out. But the Phaeolus schweinitzii, or the Dyers Polypore, very strange looking, often multi-level, multi-tiered kind of cap. They look kind of soft and velvety to me when they're young, and they look a bit like a Danish pastry or something, in my opinion. And they also fluoresce really bright under UV light. But you can collect these and boil them with some protein fabric. That's a whole nother video. But fungal dyeing is a pretty popular thing, and so the Dyers Polypore, probably one of the most popular ones to use for fungal dyeing. And this is what it looks like with the UV light on it. So this is a 365 nanometer UV light. I'll put a link for one of these in the description of the video. But the metabolites, the little moisture drops that come out of it, are often really green. This one's not doing much gutating right now. The Phaeolus schweinitzii, a cool mushroom, UV reactive, and not edible, way too tough, but a really cool craft mushroom. That's a really nice specimen of Dyers Polypore, but I'm going to leave it behind today. I'm not really looking for Dyers mushrooms, so let's keep going into the woods. So right here we have a really common edible mushroom that likes to grow off of logs. This time it's a red alder log. I can see the leaves laying right here. But this one is called Plotus Pulmonarius, or the white oyster mushroom. And it's actually really common on decaying logs, hardwood logs laying in the forest. Here in the Northwest, big leaf maple, red alder. These are great trees to find oyster mushrooms growing on all times of year. So they are fruiting right now in the fall, but we can also find them in winter. I find them in spring, and I'll even find them in summer. So they're one of the few mushrooms that you can find all seasons, but they are fruiting right now. And one thing about the oyster mushroom is that it's really easy to identify. It's really delicious, but the bugs also like to eat this one. So you got to beat the fly larvae to it. And so if you collect these when they're kind of older, they will definitely have larvae in them. And if you let them sit in the fridge for a few days, you might have a writhing pile of worms when you open up the bag. So I'm pretty picky about my oyster mushrooms when I pick them for the dinner table. But these are the same ones that you can find in the grocery store. You could easily take this and just take a small tissue sample and put it on agar, and it would start to grow a new mycelium, and you could grow this oyster mushroom at home. Really voracious, really easy to grow. These are the beginner mushroom for all mushroom cultivators, pretty much, who are starting to learn to grow gourmet mushrooms. Start with Pleurotus, or the oyster mushroom. So they smell a little bit like licorice. They have gills that run down, and they usually have like a little bit of a stem on them. So the oyster mushroom, a really good mushroom. You could definitely collect these for the basket, and you can even grow them easily at home. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Mushroom Wonderland. Make sure to go to mushroom-wonderland.com, get yourself some merch, help support what we're doing here. And until the next episode, much love, everyone. Peace out.